Hey guys, tonight we're crossing the endless Sahara with Molly's legendary salt caravans epic journeys, where survival meant reading the stars, mastering silence, and knowing the desert's secret tricks. Imagine hundreds of camels loaded with blocks of salt, trudging for weeks through scorching days and freezing nights, guided only by memory and constellations. Every step was a gamble against thirst, sandstorms, and exhaustion, yet these caravans kept Molly's wealth flowing, and its empires alive. If you've ever wondered how traders conquered one of the harshest places on earth, this story will take you there. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Let's march into the sands of history together. The dark is soft and cool, like the inside of a date before it remembers the sun. You wake beneath canvas that breathes with the breeze, shadows of palm fronds swaying across the roof like lazy fish. A brazier nearby sighs the last of its night warmth, and a camel somewhere behind your head grumbles politely about the state of dawn. Your breath leaves a small cloud in the air that disappears greedily, as if the morning is sipping you to see what you taste like. The camp is a low constellation lamp here, ember there, people moving in quiet arcs. You stretch and sand whispers under your mat. Beyond the last tent, you can just make out the patient, lumpy skyline of the herd. There, long lashes blinking in slow motion. One lifts its head and fogs the air, a soft white bloom in the gray. It smells of wool, leather, and the honest work of animals who know the road better than you do. You sit up, and the canvas tilts a little, like a boat remembering how to float. Your hands find your scarf, your feet find your sandals, and your sandals immediately reconsider their career choices. They tighten their straps in protest, and you promise them good stories as hazard pay. The palms above you clap once in the breeze, as if amused. The oasis holds the night for as long as it can. Date palms rise like dark fountains, trunks banded where knives climb to harvest last season's sweetness. The ground is patchwork damp near the well mouth, crusted farther out where the last watering licked the dust into obedience. Can hear the well's low echo water talking to itself down a stone throat, and a rope creak as someone draws a skin from the cool. A little line forms, not because anyone said so, but because thirst always knows its place in the order of things. This place, whether it's the outskirts of Timbuktu or the sandy shoulder of Wallata, feels like a pocket stitched into the desert's robe. Oases are lifelines here. They are wells, yes, but also palms and shade and repairs and gossip bundled together. Water keeps bodies upright. Palms feed you today and promise more in months to come. A patch of shade keeps arguments small. And gossip. Gossip is the postal service. Which wells are sour? Which paths are buried? Which caravan met which wind and came away with which opinions? Information is a kind of water you carry in your head. You drink yours in cupped palms. The water tastes clean and a little mineral, like a pebble that practiced being a star. It sheets off your tongue and goes in quietly, and you feel your insides. Put down the baskets they were carrying. Someone passes you a date that tastes of sunlight pressed flat and saved for later, softened in a dip of water. A good morning can be that simple, cool, sweet, simple. The caravan in Azali, a traveling city of salt and stories, is not a single body but many bones and ligaments. It is the lead guide's gesture, and the waterkeeper's count, and the cook's small fires, and the pathreader's silence. You are a small unit inside that larger creature, a fingertip on its left hand. Your lead guide moves like someone who is used to being followed, not because he shouts but because he points with his chin and the air obeys. He has a staff polished by years of palms and a habit of listening first. When he says we go, the word carries the weight of all the safe arrivals behind him. The waterkeeper is already awake, counting by touch in the half-light. He knows which goatskin is heavy, which is honest, which has always been a little vain and leans when no one is watching. His fingers travel the seams, his ear presses to his shoulder, his mouth clicks when a stopper looks like it might tell lies. At noon, he rations in sips, not spectacles. Animals first, then people, then skins for the road. His gift is turning thirst into math that feels like kindness. The cook is a magician in reversi, makes smoke disappear. His fire is a low, careful thing, more sigh than flame. A kettle ticks and breathes on a nest of coals, and the first tea thinks it's bitter thoughts. He breaks flatbread, as if waking it gently, and warms yesterday's millet until it remembers. Being friendly, he will feed the caravan courage in 3 cups, strong and sharp to wake the ribs, sweet to coax the legs, sweeter to remind every temper that it prefers company. For now he hums, and the kettle hums with him. The desert's path sits with his back to a palm, an indigo veil trailing a line of night down his chest. He speaks with glances, not paragraphs. His eyes know wind better than most, mouths know words. He wears a little leather bag of sand samples and pebbles that have been introduced properly. In daylight he reads the dunes the way scribes read ledgers. By night he steers by stars that your tongue still can't pronounce. When he nods, you trust your feet without checking. The cool season calls you out now, when the Sahara remembers mercy. In the months when air will turn to white iron, caravans stay small, close to shade, patient as mats. But now the nights come long and the breath hangs visible. Camels drink less. Waterskins last longer. Distance goes down easier when it doesn't burn your throat. You leave in this season for the same reason birds know which wind to take. It's not bravery, it's alignment. The desert is a careful teacher. It rewards students who show up at the right hour. Night is your favorite road for the same reason. In the dark, the sand cools and firms. A crust that supports rather than swallows. The air walks with you rather than sitting stubbornly on your shoulders. Stars draw their lines with a ruler and let you measure your steps against something that doesn't move. By day the sky is a white shout. By night it's a listening ear. You'll travel when it leans down to hear you. You dab water on your scarf and tie it so your breath meets cool on its way in. The fabric smells faintly of tea and dust and a little of last night's stew. Your sandals settle, resigned, and you reward them with a quick pat and a promise that the first short break will include a kind word and a lapful of shade. The palms applaud again, or maybe the wind simply has priorities. Around you, the camp loosens its stitches. Tethers are checked, knots retied, poles lifted and leaned. A boy with a bellstring walks the line of hobbled camels and replaces a lost clapper with a shell. The little notes will keep time later, front to back, a gentle metronome that says, still here down the length of the file. A woman tightens a saddle pad, and the camel turns its long face and hums an opinion. She hums back, lower, and the animal agrees to be reasonable. The lead guide makes a small circle in the air with his staff, and people drift toward their places the way iron finds a magnet. You move to your spot in the string, third pair back, left side your hands. Test the rope where it will cross the first load. It creaks like a book opening. The cook passes a cup, and you taste the day's opening chord strong. An uncomplicated dand. The warmth drops into you like a coal placed thoughtfully in a brazier. The waterkeeper takes a moment to speak the plan to a small knot of faces. Evening fill, dawn fill, well at the third watch, he says, and taps his knuckle against 3 stoppers. He draws a line in the dust with his toe distance. Rest, distant sand, smudges it with his heel at noon, where the tent skins will come down low and the desert will be told to wait. Your path reader rises without fuss, indigo trailing, and tips his head toward the west, where a pale line hints at the sun's backstage preparations. He opens his palm to feel the air, cool, from the north, carrying the smell of old mud from the river's far throat. Good. He draws his scarf up and points, with 2 fingers along a dune that looks like a sleeping whale. Skirt the belly, not the back. Everyone's feet nod. The oasis murmurs, approving of your plans. A woman at the well covers it with planks against the day's carelessness. A basket of dates is tied high against small thieves with nimble hands and excellent taste. A scribe rolls his leather ledger and tucks it under his arm. Numbers sleeping in neat columns that will wake later to tell you who owes which kindness to whom. Someone's laugh floats across the palms, thin and silver, and then is gone, folded. Into the morning, you take the quiet as a sign to ask one small question of the day. You wet your finger and hold it to the air. The breeze kisses it like a polite aunt. North, your cheek confirms. Your scarf agrees. You lift your palm to your chest and feel your heart keeping time with a camel's patient chewing. Curiosity puts a hand on your shoulder and asks what the dunes will write today, and whether the stars will choose the same sentences they chose last week. You promise to read carefully. The lead guide lowers his staff to a rest and glances toward the loading ground, the rectangle of trampled earth where wood and rope and felt and balance will soon have their morning conversation. You can see the pack saddles arranged like quiet thrones, the felt pads piled like sleepy clouds, the flat wooden toggles that know exactly how far to bite. Salt will come later, white rectangles of winter thunder, but the first bundle, grain, tents, pots will teach your hands again how to ask weight to behave. The cook's kettle gives a last dignified sigh. He empties a pinch of tea back to the ground, for those who are gone, and those too far to share this cup. He flicks the lid closed, and his fire settles into its own nap. The waterkeeper ties a final knot, and tucks the tail where no thorn can find it. The pathreader tests the first dune with 3 slow steps, and leaves prints that look like punctuation marks. The lead guide meets your eyes, and his mouth draws the smallest smile, the kind that says, "You know what to do." You do. The oasis has put its gifts into your pockets: wet cloth, sweet dates, full skins, words of wells ahead, the day's first joke. The palms lift their fronds like blessing hands. Camels murmur and blink, and join the line with the dignity of elders joining a procession. Your sandals take a breath and square their courage. The horizon doesn't hurry, it simply opens. The sky is a bowl turning from slate to ash to pearl. You step toward the loading ground with your rope looped ready, and the ground meets you with the forgiving firmness of cool sand. The caravan shifts its weight and becomes a single body. The first saddle waits like a question you're happy to answer. You reach for the felt, the wood, the rope, and the morning moves one notch closer to the road. The first saddle waits like a quiet problem that already knows the answer. You set the felt pad in place, thick and forgiving, and smooth it with your forearm so there are no sneaky folds. The camel lowers its long eyelids as if this is a spa appointment it booked weeks ago. Wood follows arched boards polished by years of backs and hand settling on the felt like a boat lowered onto calm water. Your palms test each edge. No bite, no corner, just the right kind of pressure where bone is brave and skin is particular. A bundle comes up, grain pots, a roll of tent cloth, and you listen for its balance with your shoulder before the rope ever thinks of learning it. The load sits low, as if it knows a secret. Things closest to the earth wobble least. You don't use the phrase center of gravity, you show it. You tuck the heavier side inward, nearer the camel's ribs, and let the lighter side ride up a finger's width to keep the pair calm. Left meets right, like two good neighbors sharing a wall. Salt will be the stubborn guest later, but even cloth wants a fair deal. You measure by feel. This side presses your palm like a firm handshake, that side like a promise, whispered. Ropes, cross, a soft X that says stay. Your wooden toggles short and oval, sand smooth, bite the line, and lock the X into a polite hug. You pull, not with bravado, but with the long, even strength your back lends you when it believes in the plan. The rope answers with a creak that sounds like an old door remembering manners. You step back and check the hump's mood. Felt must be where felt should be, and nothing should touch the place where the camel keeps its stories. A finger slides under the board to test for sneaky pressure. Another finger at the girth checks for kindness. You give the strap 2 extra breaths and a half. The camel sighs and blows a small fog into the cool. Agreement. The bell camel wears a small bronze voice at its throat, high and bright. It's the metronome for the morning. The front chime sets the pace, a steady "we are walking now" that travels down the file. Somewhere toward the back, a deeper bell keeps a slower truth. We are still together. Between them, the tiny notes of shell and tin stitch the caravan's line into a song you can walk inside. When the bells fall out of rhythm, feet adjust. When they agree, the day behaves. Salt arrives like winter lightning in tidy rectangles. You run a flat palm across the slab and it whispers grit into your skin. 2 slabs per side is a conversation. 3 per side is an argument. Today, 2 for this camel, because we are easing back toward work and the dunes ahead prefer modesty to pride. You lay the first slab low, close to the board, and snug against the pad, and feel the weight sink into the animal's frame, the way a thought sinks into bone. The second sits just above it, nudged inward so the pair becomes a team. Here, Comes your favorite liar, a slab with a shy bevel that looks like it's planning mischief. You give it the squint it deserves, and talk to it under your breath. Don't even consider it. It pretends innocence, and slides one size worth toward the edge. You slide it back, and set a counterweight to small sacks of grain on the temperamental side to remind the slab of its responsibilities. The rope crosses again, toggle turns, and the slab decides to be a citizen. You teach physics with pictures, not numbers. You show the apprentice how a higher bundle sways with the camel's long stride, turning each step into a story about gravity and regret. Then you lower the bundle, tuck it close, and the sway becomes a shrug. You press one hand to the left load, and one to the right. They answered the same way. 2 shoulders, 1 coat, you say, and the apprentice nods, because a coat that sits right feels right. Now, the girth line, the belt that holds the day up. You run it under the belly and back, smoothing hair with your palm so nothing pulls where it shouldn't. You draw the strap and feel for that exact breath where the camel says enough, not too much. It is a language of ribs and leather and patience. You find it. The strap sings a small note against wood, and the bell at the throat answers as if to sign the receipt. A test step before a long step is the kindest rule in camp. You ask the camel to shift its weight and take 3 small strides inside the rectangle of trampled ground. The load speaks during those 3, a whisper here, a click there, one rope settling and another asking for a shorter story. You tighten, a finger's worth, lift a toggle an inch, and the whispers stop. Better here than on the long sloped face of a dune when sand wants to move under everything. The line grows. Camel after camel, drawing their own careful sentences on the morning. Bells overlap like a quiet market of clocks. Felt pads disappear under boards and bundles until the caravan looks like a procession of thoughtful cupboards. At the rear, the deep bell clears its throat. 1, 2. The front bell answers. Step, step. Between them, you breathe in time, and even your sandals, who have opinions, agree to participate. Ropes carry memory in their fibers. Yours remember last season's knots and look grateful to see the same hands. You flip a half hitch, throw a clove, snug a square. The toggles of the clever cousins twist a lock, twist back to speak. You don't fight rope, you court it. No jerks, no drama, just steady persuasion until every line lies down where it was always meant to be. When a rope complains with a squeal, you rub a little fat on the spot that rubs, and it learns to whisper again. Someone checks the back bell. Camel's tail, not just a loose loop from the last animal to the pole of the one before it. A courtesy, link that keeps thinking together when the wind makes everyone philosophical. Not a hard tie. No one is binding anyone here. Just a hand on a shoulder that says, if your eyes wander, mine will bring you home. Salt stacks finish, and the counterweights get their final say-water skins balanced against slabs. Tent rolls against pots. A pouch of dates moved from a high promise to a low certainty. You tap each toggle as if blessing it, and the wood answers with little wooden consonants. The camel turns its head and directs a long gaze toward your pocket. You surrender a date. Fairness is contagious. The bell language tightens into meaning as the lead guide lifts his staff to chin height. Front chime. 2 quick notes. That's the prepare your feet song. Rear bell waits a heartbeat and gives 1 low, I heard you. The tiny shell bells twitch along the middle as handlers step away from flanks and into their spots beside the line. Your palm lands on rope that already sits exactly where it belongs. The air in your scarf smells of weak tea, clean fur, and the dusty mint someone crushed under a heel. You walk the length once, eyes level with each load. You are looking for lies, a strap that tells you it is straight when its shadow says otherwise, a slab with wanderlust, a felt pad that crept a thumb's width. You find a single knot that wants dignity and retie it so it can brag later. You find nothing the desert could use against you, and that is the whole point of mornings like this. The path reader stands with his veil blue as early sky and points along the dune ridge where wind wrote overnight. He traces a small shape in the air that means around, not over, and your knees thank him in advance. The waterkeeper tucks his tally cord into his sash where he can touch knots and think in sips. The cook pinches the fire closed and slides the kettle into a cradle of cloth, the last breath of steam turning to pearl in the cold. The first stride belongs to the bell camel. It takes it like a polite suggestion, and the chime answers. Your own feet go next, a heartbeat behind, and the whole file learns the morning's length. Long, even, generous on the roll, stingy on the stomp. Sand receives you with a hush that feels like approval. The ropes relax into their roles and the toggles, smug with a job started well, stop thinking about it. As the camp shrinks behind you, the palms become a fringe on the horizon's robe. The bell at the rear gives a single low note that feels like a promise. No one is left. The line nods, and the dunes ahead turn pale as breath on glass. You step into them with your hands tingling from rope, your shoulder warm from felt's memory, and your eyes a little greedy for the day's quiet tricks. Your favorite lyre of a salt slab stays where it should, perhaps because you told it a story as you tied it, perhaps because the counterweights are excellent gossips. You allow yourself one private grin and one last tug that isn't necessary but feels like love. The front bell adds a second chime and you match it, stride for stride, into the softness where the desert begins writing its next chapter under your feet. The last palms fall behind. You like a green sentence that decided to end kindly. Ahead, the scrub thins to sketch marked tufts of tawny grass, a lowthorn, a stubborn bush until even those lift their hands in surrender and let the sand take the page. The light widens, the sky stops being a ceiling and becomes a drink you could sip if you tilted your head just right. Hoofs pad in patient rhythm, a soft percussion that makes thoughts walk instead of run. The bell at the throat of the lead camel gives its steady note, and you find your breath catching the same beat. The leather strap across your palm warms to your skin. It creaks the way a well-behaved door does. In your pocket, to date pits, greet each other quietly each time your step swings. Click, click like a very small metronome with excellent manners. The line arranges itself without speeches. The bell camel goes first, with the lead guide at its shoulder, staff in hand, eyes resting far ahead, as if reading a line no one else sees yet. Then pairs of camels stretch behind, sometimes single file where the path narrows, sometimes two. When the ground is generous, you keep 3, sometimes 4, camel lengths between your load and the next tail. That space is kindness, room for a stumble that doesn't become a story, space for a rope to lie straight, air enough so each animal can walk like itself. Marching order is simple, so it works even when thoughts are sandy. Big loads near the front, water where the guide can ask it questions with a glance. Spare animals tucked into the middle where calm rubs off on them. The cook's bundles not too far from your own so a kettle can appear at sense-making moments. The rear bellow and reassuring lags at the back, a heartbeat that says, we haven't forgotten anyone. Hands talk because mouths prefer to keep their moisture. A raised palm means hold. A slow, downward patting motion means quieter. Feet, even if your feet already think they are poems. A circle with 2 fingers in the air, tight and small, tells the line to draw inwind in the face ahead, or a narrow stretch of ground where dunes lean like drowsy giants. 2 fingers from eyes to the left, look there. There's a dip pretending to be flat. The path reader sometimes lifts his scarf and sets it down again with a flick. That's the one that means angle right. Trust me, you do. A pair of scouts ride a few dune shoulders ahead. The quiet Tuareg path reader and a younger rider who is learning to hear the ground with his ribs. They are not there to run fast. They are there to look slow. They read the wind's habit. On the skin, measure ripple spacing with their eyes, as if counting beads, and sniff the air for dust that arrived from very far with news. They notice crusted pans where last season's rain forgot to leave, and they nod at the harder skin underfoot that comes with cold nights. A road made by temperature, not by people. The Sahel fades behind you by degrees. Tawny grass patches grow, sparser, and then turn too thin, sun-bleached commas. The sand ahead is not one color. It is several. Pale straw where the wind has polished it, a faint rose where iron had an opinion, a deeper beige where last night's cold held on to shadow. A little longer, low ripples run shoulder to shoulder, a rumor of waves that forgot how to be water. You listen with your feet. The firmer flats between ridges answer like wood under a rug. The softer crests answer like memory foam. You lift your cheek to the breeze and let it pick a side of your face. You test the day's first breeze with your cheek and guess its story. It feels like a northerly this hour, a bit of old river damp carried on an otherwise dry exhale, a good walking breath that promises the dunes will tilt their easier sides toward you for a while. Your scarf filters the finest dust. What sneaks through tastes like chalk softened with a leaf of mint from the skin dust and mint, the desert's version of breakfast tea. The bell language settles into a paragraph. Front bell, a steady sentence that keeps verbs coming. Rear bell, the bass line that holds the melody. Between them, the tiny shell bells dangling from halters make their own punctuation commas during smooth going. Semicolons, when the path asks you to consider your options. You lick your thumb under the scarf, and the mint taste comes back, green and small, and your tongue becomes civilized again. Here is how the line breathes. The guide lifts his staff, a finger width, and the front slows for a shallow swale. The second pair shortens their steps without needing to watch. You do the same a breath later because rhythm travels faster than orders. A hand from the path reader dips, and the file leans right to skirt a darker patch where the sand looks satiny, the kind that gives way with secret delight. Behind you, a handler whistles twice, high and short. The rear bell answers with a single knock. The whole string becomes one animal changing its mind kindly. You pull the skin from the side of your saddle and take a measured sip. The water tastes faintly of the goatskin, of smoke from last night's kettle, and of the fresh mint that the cook slid in at dawn as thanks to your throat for hosting breath all day. You roll one sip across your tongue and let it be perfume. As much as drink, the second sip goes somewhere lower, where hours accumulate. You pass the skin to the apprentice rider on your right and watch his eyes brighten the way new plants brighten after the first rain. Ahead, the scouts drift up a slip face that leans a bit too steep toward the wind. You watch where their ankles sink and where they don't. The path reader pauses at the crest and rests his palm on the sand like he's greeting a friend. Then he lifts it and maps the grains falling back fast, coarse, eager. He draws a short line with his heel where the caravan will cross. Not here too soft, but 30 paces down where the ripple width tells of tighter packing. You file that in the drawer in your head, labeled things to notice more often. The scrub makes one last stand, 3 bushes in a line, like elders who refused to move when the village shifted. Beyond that, the world gives itself to texture. Windscribed ribs repeat into distance. A long shallow pan gleams slightly with the memory of a puddle. A tired acacia finally gives up pretending to be tall and lies down like a thinky animal. Sky slides down, closer, until you don't so much look up as live inside it. The marching order breathes again. The lead guide shifts his chin toward a string of low dunes. That chin has more vocabulary than some people's tongues. It says, keep to the interdune floors where last night put a crust. Let the animals step in each other's prints to make a single firm path. Watch for the darker strips that mean damp hangs under the surface like a secret route. You admire how much a chin can do. Hands flash a small story down the line, 2 fingers walking on the other palm. Shorter steps. You adjust your sandals, suddenly poetic, find their own complaint, and then decide against it when they realize the ground is choosing to help. The rope across your hand hums its one note, and your shoulder becomes the place where weight and kindness share a bench. The date pits in your pocket. Click a new tempo for the brief climb, and then return to simple time. As you ease down the lee, during a pause to tighten one conspiratorial strap, you notice the smell at your sleeve. Leather, warmed by skin, a little lanolin from felt, a ghost of tea. The camel hums under its breath, more vibration than sound, and you feel it through the wood of the pack saddle, like a friend clearing their throat just to tell you they're near. You rub the spot behind its jaw, and it turns that long, curious mouth, as if to say, yes, there. A distant call carries thinly across the morning air, scribes greeting to a companion moving ahead with a ledger bag, or a herder at the very edge of where oases pretend to be islands. The wind edits the words until only the intention remains. Together, it's enough. You tuck it in beside the mint, the scout's gesture back flat palm, then the kind of wave you'd use to invite a cat to use a different path. The next stretch has ripples marching like tidy soldiers, all their crests pointing the same way. That's the wind's handwriting saying recent, which means the sand at the tops might be loose and proud. The interdune between them, though, looks darker, which means a touch of fine silt or early dew gave it backbone. You angle left to string those flats together like beads. Sand reading is coming like a lesson bell, and you're ready to be the attentive student who sits near the front. Another sip from the skin-destined mint, and the memory of cold. You slide the plug back with a twist that your fingers have learned by heart, and tuck it where it won't bump the salt slab that has decided to behave today. Your cheek meets the breeze again. It has kept its small promised north-north, kinder than fierce, bringing news of nothing dramatic. You nod to the air like you would to a neighbor you hope to borrow ladders from later. The sky lifts further, and the color moves toward pale milk. Somewhere below the surface, beetles write urgent messages none of you will read. The pathreader slows a fraction and points to the very fine spacing on a patch of ripples where the sand is speaking in a whisper, meaning, soft, don't trust. 2 fingers make the small circle for tighten up, and the line draws in just enough so a single well-packed track will form for the others to trust. You taste your own breath in the scarf, and it tastes like someone else's patience. The bell ahead gives a confident chime. The one behind answers with a nod. The dune faces start to open their grammar to you. Inward slope, shallow and stiff. Leeward side, steep and tempting like a new pillow you shouldn't lie on. The wind combs the tops into little feathery edges that glitter when the sun finally decides to practice brightness. You let the date pits click once more and press your palm to the rope as if greeting a friend. Before a tricky conversation, your eyes follow the scouts to the next line of ripples, already translating wave height into ease, spacing into firmness, color into mood. The caravan stretches and settles and moves like one long thought through the widening light. The Sahel sighs behind you. The dunes clear their throats. You lean into the morning and prepare to read what the sand is about to write. You let your eyes settle into the dunes the way you'd settle into a story's low at first, then suddenly fluent. The wind has been writing all night, and the page is open. Each ripple crest is a tidy underline showing you which way the breath of the desert has been traveling. You read the line with your cheek first, because faces know wind better than maps. The little ridges point their neat noses downwind. Their backs are round and friendly. Their fronts are sharper, like tiny knives laying flat. If the crests all point the same way, the wind has been confident. If they crossed like woven mats, the wind changed its mind and left a footnote. You walk the interdune flats the way you'd walk the margins of a book, roomy, forgiving, and full of small notes only you can see. These flats are firmer. At dawn, their best. The night cool gave the grains a thin crust, a fragile cookie you can step across if you don't argue. Your camel's broad foot tests it and finds it worthy. The sand accepts the weight with a quiet hush. You file that away, under good sentences to revisit. A slip faces the dunes whispering side the steep slope on the lee, where wind lifts grains up and then lets them pour down like sugar. You don't need angles to understand it. You just need eyes. If the sand is steep enough to make your ankles complain in advance, that's the slip. You avoid it the way you avoid polite traps at markets. Walk around the toe, not over the crown. Let the windward side shallower, more patient carry you along its shoulder. Animals prefer it too. They would rather take 5 easy breaths than one dramatic tumble. Ripples tell time as well as direction. Close ripples, packed tight like lines on a small page, mean the wind worked late and recently. Those tops can be soft and showy. Your foot might sink just because the desert wanted to make its point again. Wider ripples, spaced like relaxed handwriting, mean the wind left earlier and the surface had a chance to think. That's your invitation to cross-step lightly. Maintain a pleasant friendship with gravity, and promise not to rush. You show the apprentice how to taste a pinch of grit, not a mouthful, just a cautious touch to the tongue. You declare, with grave authority, that the chapter is sandy today. He rolls his eyes with respect and relief. The truth is, your taste buds are less helpful than your fingertips. Rub a pinch between finger and thumb. Coarse grains feel like ground pepper. Finer ones feel like flour. Coarser often means better footing. Heavier grains sit tighter, like well-behaved neighbors. Finer can mean silky and sly, especially near the tops. You let your skin be your reading lamp. When the sand goes satiny dark in strips, there's likely a memory of moisture hiding just underneath. Do that arrive with night, and refuses to introduce itself properly. Those darker lanes are good. Roads in the morning, by noon they'll relax and lose their manners. You make a habit of crossing them early, like catching a ferry when the river is in a good mood. Your hands talk the caravan along the punctuation. A low pat means softer feet. A circling finger means draw the line in tighter so a single firm track forms for all to follow. You never command the desert. You just ask the day where it wants your feet. The bell camel's chime becomes the margin. Note that keeps everyone on the right paragraph. Behind, the deeper bell nods, still together, still within the story. Soft footfalls make a dependable drum. Sand gives back only enough sound to prove it's listening. Your scarf rustles each time you glance to scan the next shape. The path reader points with 2 fingers at a crest that feathers tiny combed edges that glitter when the sun thinks of showing off. Feathers mean the wind is still combing today. The top will be lively. The flank will be calmer. You choose. The flank, angle along the shoulder, and let the dune behave like a polite hill rather than a stage. You skirt toe after toe, never stepping on the dune's pride. Toes are the low bulges where sand pools out onto flats. They're firm beneath the crust at dawn. They get moody by afternoon. You treat them like sleeping cats. Pass close, never stomp, and don't try to pet upward. The caravan bends around them like a ribbon around a jar. Each curve you make becomes easy news for the camels behind you. This way, smooth here, steady there. Sometimes a long shallow pan interrupts the ripple script, an old lake bed written in pale clay. You love these. They are blank pages with strong spines. In early light, they harden enough that you could imagine rolling a wheel across them. You don't have wheels. You have quiet feet and a string of patient beasts. So you cross with gratitude and avoid the scatter of darker patches where the crust is thin. The cook, who collects sensible metaphors, calls the pans breakfast plates. You nod because breakfast plates are for passing without spilling anything, where the ripples gather into chorus and the tones grow higher, crest on crest. On crest on crest you slow. The guide raises his staff a finger. The bell adds a little comma, and the line shortens its stride. Short steps are the desert's favorite grammar. Long steps dig and argue. Short ones float and agree. Each foot falls into the print in front, packing it down like a careful editor pressing a word into place. A gust lifts your scarf edge and combs your hair with a gritty comb. The wind's handwriting tickles your ear from the north, still, honest, and cool. You tilt your cheek to listen better. Wind that smells faintly of old water usually means the day will keep its temper. Wind that brings hot dust from a distant quarrel means the dunes may rewrite themselves at noon. Today's sentence is calm. You read it happily. You pass a patch where 2 wind stories crossed recently. The ripples knit into each other, like 2 looms arguing over the same cloth. The surface looks beautiful and untrustworthy. The path reader sketches a small detour with his heel, and you follow it toward a more coherent page. Your sandals silently thanked him by not filling with half the Sahara. The sun lifts but stays thoughtful, a pale coin behind a thin scarf of cloud. Its light flattens shadows and erases some of the helpful relief. You compensate by lowering your gaze and reading texture close, where grains flash, where they lie matte, where a crust makes a faint eggshell crackle under the camel's step. Your ears help 2 firm flats answer with a deeper hush, loose crests with a dry whisper that with your patience, when in doubt, you stop and let the dune explain itself. You watch a few grains roll at the edge of your boot, count how quickly they settle. Touch the slope with your palm and feel whether it flows back like sugar or holds like damp flour. You don't hurry the lesson. The caravan rests in the pause. Bells quiet, animals chewing thoughts. Then you choose the gentler line and release the breath you'd been saving. The day lengthens and the crust gives up its early promises. Footprints grow a little deeper. The flats answer less stoutly. That's fine, you planned for it. The afternoon becomes smaller on purpose. Shorter pushes between longer rests. Shade pulled low to make your own horizon under cloth. Sips measured, voices fewer. You save energy the way a careful reader saves favorite pages for later. The dunes, pleased with themselves, shimmer. You find a small rise with a view that lets you measure the chapter ahead. The ripples align to the northeast, as if the wind signed its name there. The slip faces all hide on the far sides, which means you can thread the shallows without climbing more than pride requires. You point, and the guide nods. The path reader's eyes fold into a smile you can read above the indigo. The caravan moves as one long sentence, following the same grammar mark to mark dot by late day. The color drains from the sand until it looks like cooled bread, the crust gone faint, the inside pale and restful. Shadows return, and with them the shape you like best. Edges readable again. Softness under control. Your scarf smells like sun and a little mint. Your tongue tastes like patience. You test the breeze with your cheek once more and feel it cooling. Night is rolling the sky out like a carpet. Stars begin pinning themselves in with tidy, bright stitches. The steady northern guide first, then the scattered ones you're still on friendly terms with even if you forget their formal names. The bell camel lowers its head and breathes a fog that finally holds its shape in the colder air. You feel the ground firming underfoot again as warmth lifts away and grains nestle together. The book is ready for new chapter. You exchange a look with the lead guide, and the look has exactly the words you expected. Night Road. It's an easy decision written by the day itself. The wind has been kind. The sand has said what it needed to say. Now the stars can speak. You rub the camel's neck where the rope sits, check one toggle out of love, not doubt, and taste one last ceremonious pinch of grit. Still, Sandy, you announce to no one in particular, and the cook snorts a laugh into his scarf. The line draws in for a brief restapor of tea that glows in cups like little planets, a last tighten of straps, a quiet thanks to the dunes. For being legible, you pull your scarf up, and the fabric whispers against your ear. The wind combs the dune tops once, twice, like a parent smoothing a child's hair. The first true stars brighten, and your feet, relieved, line themselves up with darkness the way words line up with a good sentence. You breathe the cooler air and step into the night's chapter, ready to read by the oldest lights you know. The sky opens like a dark silk tent, stitched with cold light. You lift your gaze, and the road reveals itself without touching the ground. There north sits steady, the one star that behaves like a nail while everything else turns. You don't need its formal name to trust it. You just keep it where you agreed to, finger widths to the left of the bell camel's ear, and your feet translate starlight into steps. The bells carry farther at night. The front chime rings thin and silver, the rear bell answers warm and low, and between them the caravan stretches into a soft necklace across the dark. Hooves hush the sand, a long, even brushing that sounds like sleep sweeping the floor. Cool wind slides under your scarf, bumps your cheek, and tells you its opinion. From the north, still hung with faint river cold, you lean into that message without hurrying. Night prefers agreement to speed. Above, a ladle of stars tips along the rim of the sky. When its bowl is up, you follow its handle toward the patient nail. When it hides low, another pattern takes over, a zigzag thrown opposite, pointing the same truth from the other side. You learn the trick of switching teachers. As the night turns, if one set of stars is shy, you rattle the lessons you learned from the others. The Milky Way, broad and soft, spills from shoulder to horizon your quiet river. Some nights it runs almost straight, some nights it arches bold. Every night it reminds you you're on a road with no dust, but plenty of directions. The guide triangulates without ever saying the word. He keeps the North Star in its place, yes, but he also draws invisible lines. This bright one sits just above that low dune crest. That wide cluster sinks toward the shoulder of that shadowed ridge. If two stars line up with a landmark, your direction is honest. If they wander, you nudge the file by the width of a palm, and the sky agrees. You copy the simplicity. Keep one star near a camel ear, another near the notch of your knuckles on the rope, and you can walk a straight thought for miles. Hands keep the ritual small. A raised palm brushed once means still on it, and your neighbor grazes your wrist in reply. The waterkeeper murmurs along the line, counting sips by breath. Not many, not few, just enough for voices to stay useful. The cook pours tea from high, at the first short halt, a bright thread in the dark that becomes foam and permission. You hold the cup in both hands, and your bones sip the heat before your mouth does. The sugar remembers stars. The mint remembers fields. You remember you're fortunate. Dune lines don't vanish at night. they just become shy. You read them by the way the starlight breaks rippled shine where the wind left low ribs, velvet where the lee slopes hide light. Wind keeps its note on your skin, steady and cool, and the grain underfoot confirms with texture, firm on the flat, tender on the crest, honest where dew stitched a crust. If cloud veils the sky, the ground takes over as teacher. You shorten, stride, stacked footprints, and let the caravan make its own road to follow. When the veil lifts, someone whispers a joke near your knee about you saluting the wrong star early in the season. It's true, you once bowed gravely to a bright planet who had the decency to shift position overnight and reveal the prank. You were forgiven instantly because everyone has saluted a show-off light at least once. The north that never sleeps forgives cheerfully, it simply keeps being north until pride gets tired and remembers how to listen. The path reader's silhouette is a slice of deeper night against the sky. Indigo drinks starlight and gives it back in a faint outline at the edges of his veil. He angles his hand, and the line bends a little to thread a low saddle between two ridges. You feel the ground firm, then soften, then firm again. The camels hum, not exactly singing, more like agreeing. The rear bell knocks once, the front bell replies lightly, and the file knits itself closer across the gentle climb. You measure distance here by small promises kept, a rest each verse of the hauling song, a sip each time a certain bright star clears a thumb length of sky, a longer stand down when the ladle tips past its invisible clock mark. No one says the numbers out loud. The rhythm keeps them for you. Pace is a kindness to tomorrow. You are walking not only to arrive, but so that you'll still like walking when the sun returns, when the moon rises. If she chooses, your shadows become companions with good manners. They walk beside the camels, long and thoughtful. Without her, the dark remains kind anyway. Your eyes learn a new vocabulary of grays. Your ears become cartographers. The front bell tells you when a dip is coming, before your ankles do. A shift in the hush underfoot warns of a soft patch ahead. The guide leans his staff, and the line reduces its ambitions by a thumb. Tea against second cup, softer, sweeter. The cook pours high, arm steady. The stream, a silver rope in the dim foam, blooms and collapses quietly. You tilt the glass and send a little back to the ground for those whose steps you're walking in. The waterkeeper checks stoppers by feel. The tally cord in his sash keeps knots where decisions live. He touches them the way a scribe touches numbers and knows the story without unrolling the page. When wind changes its story, it tells your cheek first. A slight wobble of cool turns to a brief hand of warm and back again. That can mean a shallow basin ahead, or a low pan still holding old night in its surface. The guide listens with his face and lets the caravan drift toward the darker, firmer lanes where the dew's kindness lingers. You follow the drift and it feels like mercy. The stars wheel slowly, like a ceiling you forgot you were turning. The steady north remains obedient, and you keep your small bargain. Don't chase it, let it sit where agreed. Walk the world beneath it. Off to your right, a scatter of tiny lights, the color of old coins, pricks the horizon. Maybe another caravan. Maybe a station fire bandaged from the wind. The sound doesn't carry. The desert is enormous and intimate at once. Neighbors far, companions near. Past midnight the air sharpens. Your breath comes out as pale threads that do not vanish all at once. The camels' coats collect a lace of dew. The ropes cool and feel more alive in your hands. The sand becomes confident under foot grains nestled tighter in the cold. Small ridges crisp up like edges of folded cloth. Feet float rather than dig. You give thanks the way a walker does, by using the gift quietly. Some hints of the well begin long before you can see it. The stars seem to wink more brightly above one part of the horizon. Not magic, just a patch of air slightly steadier over lower ground. The wind carries a thin mineral thought, a suggestion of wet stone. Beetles drift toward that suggestion, their small tracks stitching new grammar across yesterday's ripples. The pathreader raises two fingers and then points, not dramatically, just like someone greeting a friend who always arrives on time. The front bell falls to a thoughtful pace. The rear bell closes the distance, one warm note at a time, until the necklace shortens into a bracelet. Whispered check-ins ripple back. All well, still good. Rope, fine. Saddle, quiet. Your tongue tastes mint and dust and expectation. You adjust your scarf and feel your pulse settle toward gratitude. Etiquette is a kind of navigation, too. Approach calm, arrive fair. A darker circle resolves from the dark ground, a ring of stones like a low crown set into the sand. The well mouth keeps the night inside, as if saving it for the day. A pole stands tipped like a star reader at rest. You hear the faintest squeak of old wood, the breath of a rope that has known more seasons than you have. The guide lowers his staff, the bells fade into patient silence, and the caravan gathers itself around the promise of water, the way stars gather around the North Steady. Without hurry, ready to follow good rules and drink in order, you slide a hand along the camel's neck, feel the cool dew on its hair, and step toward the stone ring. The wind folds its notes small, so you can hear the first bucket kiss the surface below. The map of the sky remains overhead, keeping its place while you change yours. You smile at the wrong star you saluted once, and at the right one you followed all night, and you prepare to share the well like a story told softly and in turn. Moonlight makes a quiet bowl out of the well, a dark circle rimmed in stone. The caravan gathers itself into good manners without anyone needing to be told. Hooves scuff once, then still. The front bell hushes. A rope lies across the mouth like a sleeping snake, tied to a tripod that remembers many nights like this one. Your palm touches the warm stone ring and comes away cool, as if the night stored a little secret there just for your hand. Etiquette arrives before the bucket. First the animals, then the people, then the skins, because the animals have carried your miles and will carry more. A low trough waits a short step away, so nothing living puts hoof or boot too near the water's mouth. The waterkeeper gestures, small and sure, and the bucket line begins. A goatskin lifts from the dark with a hollow glug, turns at the rim, and spills into the trough in a silver ribbon that smells like stone made kind. The camels lower their lunar faces and sip the way. Books whisper steady and wise. One sighs, long and grateful, and your ribs answer. The bucket is stitched skin with a wooden throat, heavier than it looks. Its seams rubbed with gum, so it will keep its promises. The rope is palm fiber braided fat, oiled just enough to quiet its complaints. When it squeaks on the pulley, you feel the sound in your own shoulder, familiar and honest. You check the line without thinking. No frayed hairs trying to become their own rope. No knots squinting like they want fame. A good rope is a loigo, friend-strong, quiet, available. When the animals have had their share, people become next. In the order of thanks, the official ladle appears, solemn as a judge, and twice as fair. It's a gourd with a shaved lip, its handle carved with tiny notches, measures you can feel in the dark. You joke that the ladle favors the waterkeeper's cousins. He taps the gourd's rim with a knuckle, and it answers with a note that says, absolutely not. You dip, tilt, and the scoop pours equally, as if it were being watched by the stars. The first mouthful tastes of mineral and moon. Cold arrives first, then a gentle steel, then grateful. Your tongue recognizes the taste, the way your feet recognize firm ground. You swallow once and stop on purpose. Salt has been riding your thoughts. All day salt in the air from the slabs, salt in the dust on your scarf, salt in your sweat that dried before you knew you were sweating. Salt makes thirst sneaky. It hides behind pride and says, you're fine. The waterkeeper's rule is kinder than pride. 2 small ladles now. Breathe. 2 small ladles. You obey and feel your insides. Write a thank you letter in a language only your bones read. The bucket line continues like a quiet dance. One lowers, one steadies, one lifts, one pours. Murmured blessings float up each time the rope moves. Thanks to the people who dug this well and lined it with stones. Thanks to the ones who covered it last time so wind wouldn't steal it. Thanks to the future drinkers who will experience the same cold surprise at the lip. A woman hums 3 notes each time a goatskin breaks the surface. The notes aren't words. Their permission. Someone swings open the slab cover on the cistern nearby, a stone cap with a palm mat under it, pinned with 2 weights. Cisterns sleep under the sand like jars buried to keep secrets. They're roofed and covered to keep out wandering pores and blown grit, to keep the sun from drinking what belongs to tired throats, to keep the water cool enough to be brave. You lift one corner, check the shine within, and lower the slab again. The cover sits back down with the little contented sound of a lid that knows its job. When it's time to fill the caravan's skins, the rules continue to be patient. First the day's travel sips, then the night's plan. Skins are checked for honesty, seams pressed, stoppers tested. A quick sniff for the wild goat perfume that means you forgot to rinse smoke out last time. The waterkeeper's tally cord hangs from his belt. Knots tell the story. Full, full, half, repair later, full. He slides his thumb over each knot the way a scribe runs a finger down a column of numbers. It's math, yes, but it's also care. You hold the skin's mouth under the ladle and feel the water knock at your knuckle soft at first, then heavier as the bag fattens like a sleeping fish. The skin grows friendly in your hands. The weight, promising tomorrow. You stop at the notch the waterkeeper calls sensible. You do not fill too bursting. A too tight skin can split at an unkind hour and become a story no one wants to tell. You tie the stopper with a small twist and lay the neck down so it won't drink its own weight back out. The rope gets its little hospital too. After the last bucket, someone rubs the pulley groove with fat so tomorrow's squeak will be a whisper. The rope is coiled not any old way, but the way that lets it pay out smooth next time without kinks that pretend to help. You lift it now that it's done working and hang it from the peg on the tripod where night air can comb it dry. A good rope dries in curves, not in knots. It remembers its better self. The trough receives a final wash and a scrape, so no old leaf or careless bug will begin a small empire. The last pour is a little ceremony, a cup tipped back into the well not waste, but respect, a sip for the place itself. You lean over the dark and listen. The well talks back in bubbles and drips, a stone throat clearing, a promise made in echoes. You help lift the slab back across the cistern's mouth. Your palms find the worn places where 100 other hands have held this same weight. The pomnat settles underneath like a blanket tucked around a sleeping child. A stone on each corner, and the lid is as serious as a scribe's seal. You blow a thin line of sand from the rim so the next opening feels like the first page of a book. Neat and inviting. People drink last with unhurried laughter in their eyes. The official ladle becomes a traveling moon between hands. Some wet cloths and lay them over scarves. Some rinse mouths and spit politely away from the stones. You take one more small dip and swish, feeling grains leave the day's words between your teeth. You could convince yourself that water has a shape tonight. It feels round, as if the ladle taught it something. Ropes on the camels are loosened the width of 2 fingers to greet the cool. A few animals kneel and roll a shoulder in the sand. The way tired shoulders everywhere asks sand for friendship. You check toggles out of habit. None of them are thinking rebellion. The bell camel sets its head on the rope like a cushion and makes a tiny snore you decide is a blessing for travel. You tuck the last filled skin into its cradle between a slab and a bundle, where the weight will ride steady and low. Your hands smell of rope, smoke, and clean stone. The waterkeeper scratches a mark on his leather ledger with a thorn and a dab of soot. Wells visited, skins topped, people counted. Numbers sleep better when they have company. The moon moves an inch along its private lane, and the wind lifts a thin sheet of cool across the camp. You roll your shoulders and feel the water you drank become gentler bones. Someone thanks the well out loud, just in case gratitude needs ears. The path reader tilts his indigo veil back and closes the cover with one firm palm. The pulley gives a last thoughtful squeak and then resigns itself to listening. You lift your eyes and see what the night plans next. A long stretch of firm flats stitched between dunes. The kind you cross with quiet feet and small ambitions. Before dawn, you will find another mouth of stone and repeat this slow kindness. After dawn, you will ask shade to be your teacher. The waterskins are lashed, the bucket stowed, the trough tipped. The animals stand taller, satisfied, and composed. You sling your scarf back into place and take the rope in your palm, ready for the soft road between stars. You can feel the day turning inside the dark like a coin being flipped one side night, the other a light that tells different rules. A promise waits in your pocket, small and ordinary, a damp square of cloth, folded for noon. The desert has a midday that prefers wisdom over bravery. You smile at the thought of low tents fluttering, windbreaks whispering, kettles ticking like polite clocks. tea poured in 3 stories from the same high arc. You will make your own shade, and let the sun pass like a guest you respect, but don't argue with Dot for now. You rest your hand once more on the well's rim, and feel the stone's cool weight. The memory of water below, the murmurs of thanks still hanging like moths around the mouth. Then you step back into the string, bells spaced far and forgiving, and walk on quiet and measured toward a dawn that will ask for smaller steps and thoughtful shade, and a midday lesson you're ready to learn. The sun climbs and the world narrows to shade and breath. You pull the low tent down close, pegging its corners so the cloth lies like a calm hand over the sand. A woven windbreak leans at the wind's preferred angle, slatted reeds letting air pass in long, cool thoughts, while turning the glare into a quiet. You loosen your scarf and veil your face lightly enough to soften the light and teach the air to arrive politely, and slip your feet out of their hard-working sandals. Bare toes find the cool edges of a palm mat, and your heels sigh as if they've just been welcomed home. Midday is not a wall. It's a teacher with firm rules. The rule is simple: only small chores, only soft voices, only movements that don't confuse your heartbeat. You sit cross-legged where the tent's shade pulls deepest, the fabric above you lifting and settling in a slow breath. Outside, the camels chewing distant metronome, turning date pits and morning grass into the promise of miles. Their shadows shrank to coin size under their bellies, their eyelids lower like blinds. You start with rope, just the part that asks, not the part that's tired and happy. Sun finds weak spots first, so you run the lines through your fingers, feeling for splinters in the fiber, listening for the whisper of wear. A frayed bristle gets a trim with the tip of a knife. A thirsty patch gets a little brush of fat so it will glide rather than argue. You mend a place with new palm braid, twisting and laying the strands with patient thumbs until the rope remembers. It was always whole. Nothing heroic, just future-proofing. Next, felt pads and girths. You lift a corner, pat out the sly sand that snuck in to make mischief, smooth the nap with your knuckles so it will sit kind on skin. The girth strap earns 2 finger widths of attention. Leather loosens in heat, the way minds do, and a small adjustment now prevents a big conversation at dusk. A toggle gets a wipe until its grain smiles again. The camel watches with one large eye, then returns to chewing a thought for the 7th time. Satisfied that you have the same plan it does, survive the afternoon with grace. Your scarf becomes a cool river when you dampen a strip and lay it across your neck. A square of cloth draped over the back of your hand keeps the pulse there content. You learn the geometry of shade, how to tilt the windbreak so every breath of air passes across the mat, how to nudge the tent a handspan so its shadow keeps you company, how to sit with knees a little raised so heat doesn't collect and complain. The kettle begins the day's small sermon. It ticks as the water thinks, then whispers as it remembers tea. Midday tea comes in 3 little chapters, each with its own task. The first is dark and brave, the leaves steeped long, the pour high so air folds into foam, and the liquid cools just enough to spare your tongue. You lift the glass and taste a bitterness that straightens your shoulders. Some say the first cup is courage for ribs, and patience for thoughts. You call it the part that reminds you you're still made of will. The second cup sweetens. A spoon of sugar falls like soft rain, catching light in the glass. The mint leaf that traveled in your water skin all morning wakes and throws its green into the room. This is the cup that befriends your breath. It doesn't race you, it walks with you, steadying pulse, smoothing voice. You share it around the official ladle's cousin in glass form, each person claiming a small arc of sweetness and returning the rest to the circle. The third cup is kindness, wearing perfume. It is sweeter still, not because you forgot the desert is serious, but because friendship is how caravans move without breaking. The pour comes from higher this time. Foam blossoms and settles, a crown that fits everyone. You sip, and your eyes soften, and your body hot. Sand-dusted, sensibly lets out a small laugh it didn't know it was saving. If there is a cure for the middle of the day, it is 3 little teas, and all the unspoken truths inside them. Food is simple on purpose. A handful of dates soft brown, some preserved sweetness with tiny map lines of sugar at the skin. You split one, and press a dab of ghee into the hollow. It melts almost at once, turning the date into a small, buttery lesson on why people have crossed deserts for the right kind of fat. Millet porridge turns obedient under the spoon, a quiet bowl you can eat with your eyes half closed. A pinch of salt slips into the tea or porridge, not much, just enough to replace what the morning borrowed from you without asking. Salt is the trickster you forgive because it keeps muscles from inventing their own knots. The rhythm outside slows to match your patience. Men repair a saddleboard with 4 stitches and a sigh. A woman knots tassels that will wag flies away. From a tender flank, the waterkeeper inventories quietly, thumb moving, knot to knot on his tally cord like a prayer bead. The path reader naps with indigo pulled to his nose, one hand on a little leather pouch filled with sand samples from places only he and the wind could point to on an empty map. Midday is also a watchful hour. You tip your sandals and shake them, because the desert sometimes tucks a small, curious scorpion into a shoe like a gift you don't want. You lift a matte edge and check for anything that likes cool dark more than you do. You rest your palm flat on your own chest to feel the beat. Stay present at a steady pace. You watch for quiet signs in others' eyes that lost their sparkle, skin that forgot to sweat, a headache that speaks in too bright a voice. The cure is not clever. Shade deeper, sip slower, cloth cooler, words kinder. It works because it listens. You learn the etiquette of light. No bragging about thirst conquered. No racing for the last strip of shade. No loud talk that might convince a tired heart it must jump higher. You speak in eyebrows and nods. If something must be said, it becomes a sentence kept short and carried by a smile. The desert hears tone before it hears words, and tone can be shade if you lay it right. Your hands find work that stays small. A rope splice here, a stitch there, a seam of a waterskin tightened with the tip of a hot needle and a breath over the seal. You rub a thumb of oil into cracked leather, the way you'd rub tired life into a friend's shoulder. You pin a feather to a bell so it sings more politely. You trim a strap so it will lie flat and not invent blisters later. In a big place, small fixes feel like spells. The tent teaches you to sit like a dunlo, curved and patient. The flap lifts on the wind schedule. Heat presses, then relents, then presses again. You move with it. Inch a mat, roll to a cooler patch. Take the third cup in 2 small sips instead of one earnest swallow. Somewhere in the middle of your careful stillness, a tiny breeze decides to visit, finds your damp scarf, and leaves a chill like a blessing. You thank it without moving your lips. You look across at the camels resting behind the windbreak, their lower lips loose in the language of nap. One kneels more comfortably on the good side and makes a sound like a drum thinking about a song. It used to know. You'll give them a damp cloth across the nostrils before you rise. It softens dust, and they pretend to dislike it for exactly 2 seconds before agreeing it's genius. Hazards drift through the hot hours like slow clouds, and your answers are the same speed, a wall of tan at the far edge of the world. You glance at the pathreader. He's already tying a scarf higher and nodding toward the line rope. The plan isn't a shout. It is 3 gestures. Bring the line closer. Kneel the camels with their backs to the push. Dampen cloths, wait behind the windbreak until the drumbeat passes. A mirage shimmers and throws a false pond across your eyes. You smile at the trick, and trust the well list instead of the horizon. A sudden, hot gust. You pin a corner, anchor a pole, and let the gust leave without comment. If someone's breath turns sharp and their thoughts scatter, you close their world down smaller. Shade, cloth, sip, story. A story is a good medicine at noon, a tale about an old guide who could smell the month in a handful of sand, or the time the official ladle ruled against a famous merchant because foam is foam no matter who you are. Laughter brings the shoulders back where they belong. The kettle retires, lid tilted so it can breathe. The last inch of porridge finds a corner of the bowl and waits for a spoon that won't return. The windbreak throws a new stripe of shade across your ankle, and you follow it without lifting more than a toe. Outside, light vibrates. Inside, it becomes honey and amber through cloth. You check the path of your own shadow and mark, with the laziness of a confident scientist, how it lengthens. Afternoon is slipping back into cooperation. The tent warms less. The mat cools more. A single fly loses its ambition. The bell camel opens one eye and decides to forgive the sun for existing. You roll your scarf, Rewrap your face, and feel your skin accept the idea of movement again, like a door testing its hinges. Before you rise, you pour a thimble of tea back to the sand in thanks for shade that behaved, for kettles that ticked at the right tempo, for ropes that agreed to be mended. You tighten one strap, not because it's loose, but because you want to tell evening that you remember how to care. You lay your palm flat on the mat, cool as a riverbed, and store the feeling where your patience lives. Then you duck out. The tent flap lifts, spills gold across your shoulders, and drops. The air outside is still bright, but less proud. You hear the camels stand with their slow, dignified grunts. The wind shifts lower. A grown-up voice again. You glance to the horizon and notice a faint smudge that is not a well, not a lake, not a promise, just heat, thinking it's clever. You grin at it and let it be. The midday teacher nods you on. You gather ropes and stoppers and the familiar faith of 3 little T's cooling in your belly. The line reforms like a sentence finding its grammar after a thoughtful pause. Hazards may visit later, the wind with its drums, the sky with its mirrors, but you carry calm answers, folded neat. In your pocket, you step to your place, feel the mat's cool ghost under your feet, and the caravan leans, together, back into the road. The wind lowers its voice, and then, without asking, starts to clear its throat. A line appears at the far edge of the world, a thin, tan smear where sky and ground shake hands too firmly. Camels flick their ears. The bell's note turns papery. You stand still and taste the air the way you would taste tea that might still be too hot. Dry, a little like old wood. The kind of taste that says dust is walking toward you on tall legs. You've learned what a harmattan front looks like when it's still polite. The horizon fades as if the desert is erasing itself with a soft eraser. Little feathers of grit lift from ripple tops and fly in a hurry. The wind teaches your scarf a drumbeat thrum steady palms on stretched cloth. You raise your hand at shoulder height. The signal moves down the file like water poured along a gutter. Bring the line in. Ropes appear like friendly snakes, and you clip tail to pole, pole to tail, until each pair of camels wears a loose companionship. Not binding, just a conversation that keeps attention from wandering when visibility decides to practice modesty. The lead guide lowers his staff and points with 2 fingers toward the windbreak kits. They were made for moments like this, and poles that become small, moving walls against a big, moving sky. You kneel the camels before the dust arrives in full dress. A press of palm to the forejoint, a word that means fold, and those long, wise legs tuck. Backs turn to the wind, so sand flows past like a river behind a stone. You slide felt up over the humps, a hand's breadth higher, less sail in the gusts. Loads sit lower against boards. Toggles get a kind extra twist so they don't compose adventures without you. Cloths come out wet, the squares you saved under the tent. You lay one across your own nose and mouth, and another across the camel's nostrils. Every season you're reminded, moist cloth turns dust spark into a whisper. People look like careful bandits, no one minds. Eyes get shade strips, a darker, we've pulled down to teach grit to choose elsewhere. The wind reaches the camp, steps through it, and adds a second beat to your scarfloser, insistent. Sand begins to speak in its thousands, nothing angry, just a constant, polite knocking on fabric and leather. You lower the windbreaks and pin their corners, then crouch close to your kneeling beast, one arm along the warm board, cheeks turned away. You look left and right. You are a tidy, breathing wall, with friends who remembered the same lesson. Commands travel by touch now, not by voice. A hand on your shoulder says fine. 2 taps on your forearm mean closer. The waterkeeper's fingers find yours, counting down sips you'll take after the gusts have finished making their point. The cook ties his kettle into its cloth cradle and tucks it under a saddle like an egg rescued from a clumsy nest. The path reader pulls indigo up to his eyes and stares into the moving tan like someone listening to an old, complicated story he's heard many times. You've seen storm bravado before, so you do the opposite. You keep everything, small movements, thoughts, plans. You do not shout at the sky. It does not speak your language. You let the wind use up its drama on canvas while you make a little country of quiet in its lead. The camels hum, deep and intermittent. The sound of a bass string stroked with 2 thoughtful fingers. It vibrates up your arm where it rests along the board and settles your ribs in place. Dust arrives as a wall and then remembers it can be a veil. The first minutes are brown and busy. The next become tan and steady. Visibility shrinks to a room. You can walk across in 5 steps. You check toggles by feel. One is thinking of being famous. You retire it from public life with a twist and a pat. The bell camel's voice becomes a whispering coin. The rear bell answers like a patient drum. One slow beat to say, "We are still a together thing." Someone snorts a laugh into their cloth quiet, and at their own expense. Everyone pretends they didn't just talk to their sandals. It happens when the wind gets loud. Promises murmured into straps about better paths and fewer rocks. Deals offered to souls about fewer opinions from the ground. It's fine. Sandals are good listeners, and they hold no grudges. You wait, because waiting is a plan, not a failure. The harmattan wastes its best energy on arrival. When it is finished being proud, it becomes useful. Wind, again direction, can lean on. Grit, you can outwit. Visibility, you can coax back with patience. You watch for the front's shoulder to pass. Indicators, the fabric drum softens from a march to a slow rehearsal. Dust coats your scarf but stops trying to climb inside. The taste in your mouth shifts from wood to a clean metal you can live with. When the world returns by degrees, you lift your head in a slow, careful hinge. The dunes are new in places, the writing on the page, smudged and rewritten. That's when the quiet plan continues. You do not rush forward as if nothing changed. You walk to the nearest Kerner waist-high pile of stones, part guidepost, part thank you gift to future you. You check it for honesty, still stacked, still pointing the line along its comfortable arc. You add 1 stone with your left hand, because your grandmother taught you to place your own luck where you want to find it again. The guide draws a small triangle in the sand with his staff. You follow the edges with your eyes. A star you trust at the top point, a cairn at 1 foot, the shape of a familiar ridge at the other. Triangulating is a big word for a simple habit. If 2 things agree with a third, you are not lost. The wind tried to shuffle the page. You redraw the paragraph. Night will check your work with brighter ink. You rise the camels one by one, front legs up, then back, a choreography as old as this road. Dust slides from pads and humps, from ropes and bells. You brush noses and clear corners of eyes with the edge of a damp cloth. The animals shake themselves into their own fur again. You run a flat palm along a load. Sand sighs down, and the slab you always watch flirts with the idea of movement, and then decides to be good. You thank it as if it understood every word. Mirages arrive once the air grows hot again, sometimes even before the storm's last skirts have gone. You explain them to the apprentice in your simplest voice. See how the sky puddles on the ground. Heat makes air bend light. The ground pretends to be wet because it borrowed the sky's face. He sees it a lake that is not a lake, a ribbon of silver at the horizon where there cannot be a river. We trust the well list and the cairns. You say, "Not thirsty." Ice. He nods and bites a date, like someone signing a contract. Sometimes a far traveler appears upside down above the sand, a walking reflection without a body to own it. That, too, is the sky making mischief with light. You wave anyway. If you're wrong, they're real and you have been polite. If you're right, you have just waved at physics, which enjoys attention as much as anything. The wind remembers manners. By late afternoon, fabric's drumbeat loses its soldiers. It becomes a soft practice behind the tent in your mind. Commands lift from touch to voice against till low, still shaped for dry air. You space the line a little wider. Let hooves find their careful punctuation across flats, where crust reforms in the cooling light. The bell at the front clears its throat once, twice. The rear bell answers. You are paragraphs again instead of a single crowded sentence. You move through a section where dunes have been combed into long ribs by the same hand that sent the dust. They're taller than at morning, sharper along the tops, with slip faces that show a fresh pore. You angle along the shoulders, keeping to the firm side where the wind leans. Short steps, one print into another, your favorite grammar. The path reader marks a detour around one particularly proud ridge with 3 heel taps. You follow the taps like musical notes you know by ear. Night rehearses in the east, wasim of deeper blue, stitching itself into the sky. Stars will check the work the storm tried to smear. You can already feel the ground cooling, grains settling, the air choosing less drama. Someone taps the kettle again. A little sugar becomes a bridge from grit to grace. You sip, and the mint is brave enough to be mint again. A scatter of pale shapes grows where the horizon had been cautious all day. At first it's the kind of light your eye makes up when it wants a story. Then the shapes take responsibility. Low walls, straight lines, shallow pits. The breeze brings a taste that isn't sky or stone, something chalky, almost clean on the tongue. The air around it feels organized, as if work lives there even when people sleep. You're close enough now to smell the mines before you hear them. Salt has a sound when it moves, the soft clack of slabs touching. A granular shuffle as a block is eased into place, the polite complaint of a chisel meeting a firm edge. You picture the shallow pits, men standing ankle-deep in earth's old breath, cutting rectangles that will ride your camels, like pale thunder. The guide lowers his staff a finger to soothe the caravan's last eagerness. Arriving calm is part of the plan. You glance along the line, cloths lowered, ropes uncomplaining, eyes alert but not hungry. The dust on your scarf tastes like a memory that already forgives itself. Your sandals, which you absolutely did not, convinced like a negotiator during the gusts, seem to approve of your current choices. You angle toward the edge of the working ground, where the wind will pass by without stealing too much. The waterkeeper counts what's left without looking. Worried, the pathreader indigo loosened from his face. Nods to a man you can't see yet, and the nod comes back along a trail the wind forgot to erase. Bells quiet, then answer, then rest. The storm turned a page. The desert wrote a new paragraph. You read it with patience, and the caravan stayed a single sentence. Now the road delivers you to white gold under a sky that has decided to behave. You breathe the chalk-cool air and step down into a place where chiptolls tap out a rhythm older than the dust that tried to teach you a louder song. Ahead waits the early shift, the first slab, and the next set of careful knots. The working ground greets you with a hush that wouldn't mind being called music. Early light lies flat across shallow pits, and men move like careful punctuation. Pop, pause, lift, breathe. The air is chalk-cool and tastes faintly clean, as if someone sifted a winter into it. Your palms remember rope and saddle, but the quarry teaches them a new texture, fine grit that clings like flour. A goatskin, waterskin, leans in the shade of a low wall, its damp throat promising the kind of drink that turns dust into silence. You step to the rim of a cut where the earth has folded back its crust to show a pale, layered body. The top is a hardened lid. Beneath, the salt rests in bands, flat, granular, ready to become rectangles that know their purposes. A worker crouches ankle-deep in the square hollow, chisel set, mallet patient. Tick metal meets crystal, not loud or angry, just steady. A line appears along the scored groove, like a thought waking up. He shifts a handspan, ticks again, draws the line into a neat frame. Salt here is white gold, because it is more than taste. It is time in a form that refuses to rot. Meat listens to it, and decides to last through a season. Milk listens and turns into braver cheese. Skins listen and become less interesting to insects. People far south will trade grain, copper, cloth, even books to keep a pinch of this quiet rock nearby. A good market smells like pepper and ink and salt, in honest. Sacks start you watch a pry bar just a length of wood with the right stubbornness nose into the scored line. A second pair of hands slides a flat wedge into the seam. They lean, not with force but with agreement. The slab rises a breath, and the quarry releases a compressed sigh. It's the sound of a lid deciding to become a door. The edge clears, the wedge advances, and the rectangle comes free with a soft thump that your feet feel before your ears admit it. The slab is warm on its skin, cool at its center. It sits on the rim while its siblings wake. A boy brings a trimming chisel and kisses away the proud edges of Siobhan, shaven till the rectangle is honest. Nothing to snag, rope, or argue with felt. The pieces he removes go into a basket. Nothing wasted. A finer tick-tick smooths a corner that pretended to be important. You pass a palm over the face and leave a print that looks like the ghost of snow. Standard size is kindness to camels, to handlers, to tacks. Each block is cut to a measure that a back understands. Height, width, thickness, that makes sense to a board in a day's worth of walking. Not too heavy for the 8th hour, not so light that someone cheated the ledger. A stamping stone round and carved with a sign presses into the damp face. Down, twist, lift. The mark is a quiet passport. Mine, team, sometimes the shift at a checkpoint or market. A glance at that sign saves paragraphs of argument. Why so tidy? The apprentice whispers. You answer in pictures. Even weight rides calmly. Even size stacks safely. Even marks settle accounts without raising voices. The desert is already large. Your job is to make everything else small. Disputes, surprises. The chance a slab will decide to travel by itself. He nods and tastes the air, and you can tell that chalk has found his tongue, too. You both pretend you won't sneeze. More pits wake. Tick-dash, tick-dash, tick-dash thump. Low greetings pass like shaded water. A man with a reed splint broom keeps the floor clean of chips so ankles won't argue. Another checks the pry bar's tip, gives it a rub of fat so it will slip more like a thought than a blade. The sun lifts a thumb above the plain and finds its manners. The light stays white and reasonable, as if the quarry taught it not to glare. The water skin makes its round. You take a sip and feel mineral first, then cold, then grateful. You pass it back with your thanks folded inside, and the skin goes on to the next hand and the next. You wipe your mouth with the back of your wrist, and your lips collect a tiny taste of salt that is neither from the drink nor the day, just a place saying hello. A team lifts 2 finished slabs to a sorting. Really just a beam on low post sand, sets them into a queue. A scribe in a headcloth taps each with a small stone, and listens for the promise of no hidden cracks. The sound is a note between wood and glass. True blocks sing deeper. When a slab answers too brightly, it steps aside for kitchen work crumbled, and sold as handfuls for cooking and curing. Fair is fair. Use is use. You help measure the morning's first load, because hands learn by holding. 2 slabs go to the left board, 2 to the right. Low, snug, close to the animal's heart. You add a small sack of broken salt as a counterweight, where a rectangle shies away from good behavior. Then a coil of rope to help tame a future bump. A felt pad gets a scolding shake so no grit hides under it to become a pebble-sized complaint. At the 8th mile, a man presses the stamp into a fresh face beside you and grins. It will walk under your stars, he says, and both of you will come back honest. You bow a little because blessings stick better when they're simple. The stamp pulls away and leaves a crisp emblem that looks like a palm and a crescent, overlapping. You don't need to read it to believe it. You step along the edge of the yard, where finished blocks wait in thoughtful stacks for high. Too wide, a walkway between. The stacks throw short shadows that reptiles appreciate. A lizard poses and considers writing its memoirs in the dust. You consider reading them later. Someone shakes a mat over the loading ground and pats it flat. The bell camel arrives with the dignity of a foreman, the tiny bronze voice at its throat ringing one test note. You set the felt, lay the boards, and invite the first rectangle onto its new life. The slab kisses the pad, settles, and says nothing, always the best sign. Rope crosses, toggle turns, your palm checks the press along the rib. You add its partner, left meets right. The animal exhales an opinion that counts as acceptance. Salt matters for far reasons, and you explain them with your hands as much as your mouth while you tie. Food carried from field to market. Meat kept until a child's birthday. Butter that survives the week. Trades that move across languages without needing translation, because a pinch of white on the tongue is a yes in most of the world. In the South, a single slab can become grain enough for a family to think wider thoughts. In the North, a stamped block is a ticket back to a well you prefer. A small ledger appears at your elbow, leather folded like a sleeping bird. The scribe marks line and notch. 8 slabs to your pair, 8 to the next, 7 to the greener. Camel who is learning what pride weighs. Tax is not a mystery here. It is a slice taken at the gate, measured against stamps and stacks. The price of the road, and the well, and the quiet night that lets you keep your goods. You find it easier to pay when the line is straight and the seal presses firm. The air gets busier with good work. Tick 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 thumb stamp. A boy hums a tune that fits the rhythm, and someone else hums the harmony. Shadows edge longer as the sun begins to think about teaching heat. A thin dust of salt coats your forearms like pale pollen. When you lick your lip by accident, you taste tomorrow's soup. And you smile because everything here will make something easier 100 miles away. You hand the apprentice the rope for the noisy slab, the one that always pretends to slide. He squints at it with theatrical suspicion and ties his square knot as if it were a small spell. You give him the counterweight sack, and he tucks it low on the slab's mischievous side. The slab sighs and decides to be a citizen. You nod, and his grin travels the length of the line like news. More waterskins pass, more stamps land and lift. The pathreader strolls the yard and notes, which stacks throw straighter lines. Straight lines at noon mean easier counting at dusk. The waterkeeper touches his tally cord and shifts his thumb. Full, half, sensible. The cook, who has already charmed a kettle into behavior, promises tea when the 8th pair is done. No one doubts his schedule. 2 final blocks settle to your camel's boards, and the rope learns their edges. You press the toggles in a last gentle quarter turn. The bell camel shakes its head once, and the bronze voice answers like a toast. The scribe scratches a tidy last mark. Your palm rests on the face of a slab that will be 100 meals and 3 walls of calm conversation far south. The quarry light brightens a shade, as if pleased that its morning will leave in good company. The yard eases. Tools are set in, shade, stamps wiped, and returned to their cloth. Pry bars leaned in their corner, where wood can dream about leverage. You offer thanks to the pit you watched wake just, a thumb brushed along its rim. The way you'd greet a friend whose advice you took. The goatskin waterskin swings onto its hook and bumps your hip like a pet with excellent timing. You turn to the loading ground with the day's work gathered against the board's white rectangles tucked low like promises that don't need advertising. Felt hugs where it should. Knots sit like little decisions you won't have to revisit. Your rope smells of palm and a little tea. Your hands smell of mineral and a morning well used. The lead guide lifts his chin and the caravan leans toward. South, not hurried, just ready. Bells give their first sentence. You glance back once, shallow pits square as pages, stamps cooling on stone, men dusting palms and laughing with the relief of clean tasks finished. The chalky air thins into the ordinary smell of road rope, animal, wind. You step into your place and the slab under your hand feels solid as a well-kept promise. The dunes ahead turn pale, waiting to be read again, and the southward leg opens like a paragraph you've been wanting to write. The caravan tilts south, weight changed and minds quiet. Salt rides low and right, a white hush against felt and board. Your hands know the new heft before the first step ropes denser in the palm, toggles answering with a deeper click. The bell at the front keeps its even sentence. The rear bell replies like a nod. Between them, the line stretches into a calm thought, moving across pale pages. You feel different, too heavier with purpose, lighter in chatter. Salt does that. It is wealth that doesn't jingle. It makes noise only when you set it down. Each rectangle is a silent promise, meals made safe, meat carried farther, trade that will turn into grain, copper, paper, news. The air finds a chalky edge when the breeze loops through the stacks, and your scarf brings a taste of clean stone to your tongue, as if reminding you of your errands. The lead guide carries a leather ledger, like a folded animal, under his arm. When you pause, he opens it on his knee, and the pages lie still as shallow water. Ink lines make sense of the white weight, which slabs bear which stamp, which pairs carry extra counterweights, which animals need kinder roads tomorrow. The marks are not poetry. They are the grammar that turns a caravan into a sentence the desert can't misunderstand. You add your small notes, one toggle that prefers a second twist, a knot that should be checked at second watch until the page becomes a map of peace dotted your belt. A tally cord rests like a sleepy snake. Knots hold today's arithmetic, where your thumb can read it without bothering your mouth. One knot for the morning well, one for the midday sip, one for the evening camp. Smaller knots for gifts given, wider knots for tolls paid. You slide your thumb over them and feel your responsibility settle into the right parts of your body. Numbers are quieter when they're touched. Waystation hosts greet you with small shade and big courtesy. A pomfrond lean-to, a mat, a pot that remembers other caravans. You offer the proper gifts that a road understands. A twist of tea, a handful of dates, a a shaved curl of salt, a story told at the right length. Hospitality is not free, and should never be priced. It's a little trade by other names. In return you receive what only rooted people collect: a gossip about dunes, moved by last week's wind, which well-learned patience, which care and grew a new stone because grateful hands passed by. This is the kind of inventory you can't stamp. You count it with your smile. Tolls at wells are fair when the line is clear and the seal is honest. A pair of guardians keeps the mouth clean and the rope oiled. It is right that they keep a portion of what passes. Sometimes you pay in coin weight that clinks and then stops clinking. Sometimes you pay in salt weight that leaves you and enters another life. Sometimes you pay with a short hour of work patching a shade screen, lifting a stone, cleaning a trough so the next set of lips meets kindness. A good toll replaces the ropes before they fray, adds a second bucket before the first cracks, writes down which skins arrived so no one argues by memory alone. Nights lengthen to your advantage. This is why caravans choose season like farmers choose rain. In the cool months, the sand firms at dawn and chills at dusk. Your animals drink less. Your own throat needs fewer sips. Distances can be taken in calm gulps instead of panting bites. Stars hold still longer in the black, and the air comes thin and merciful under your scarf. Travel out of season is a bargain. With a cranky god, shorter night, louder sun, more salt leaving your body than the slabs can pay back. You nod at the stars, and they nod back. Agreement. The shared watch begins with tea poured, just high enough to sound like a promise. Pairs take turns, one listening to bells and breathing, one reading the seam where sand turns to sky. You move like a whisper along the string, hand brushing rope, palm resting on warm board, eyes learning each silhouette as if it were a letter in a simple alphabet. A good watch catches nothing dramatic. It gathers small kindnesses lack taken up, a pad smoothed, a strap turned so it won't chafe tomorrow. You trade places with a friend, and your voices stay low, but your thoughts rise and bow to each other like neighbors across a lane. Some nights hold the insect choir thin and far. Away this side of the desert does not give them much to sing for. Their small bell sounds lace the edges of camp, and the rear bell's bass note folds over them like a blanket. The breeze runs its cool fingers over salt faces, and the slabs do not answer. Wealth needs no words. You imagine the trades to come, grain bulging in a woven sack, cola nuts stacked like small, bitter moons, a sheet of paper catching ink, a copper bracelet circling a wrist that will sign a sale with laughter. You do not hurry the picture. You let it walk at bell pace. There is, of course, the one camel who prefers poetry to pace. She will stop politely, mid-step, to watch a smudge on the horizon grow into nothing at all, to listen to a bell that no one rang, to sigh as if she were on good terms with the moon's diary. When pressed, she proceeds, but only after composing 2 lines about dignity and dunes. You respect her craft and organize the line, so her neighbor is a practical soul with a talent for gentle persuasion. Between them, progress and metaphor arrive. Together day by day, barter bundles shift as you trade. The pouch of needles wears down by 3, and up by a grateful story from a saddle mender. A roll of cloth becomes tassels that wag away flies from a new friend's beast. A thread of beads becomes a smile that you will remember at a later well. When water is slow to rise, you keep a thin ribbon of copper for an official's seal metal, remembers promises, and a little cone of incense for those places where smoke is how you say hello to the air dot. At evening halts, you lay out a ledgers, small ceremony. The scribes read pen scratches a neat line, slabs remaining, small pieces given, tolls paid, stamps tallied. He closes the leather with a press that sounds like a low drum. The waterkeeper's cord tells the same story in knots another language, saying, enough, wise, ready. This is how caravans turn salt into sleep. Sometimes the well is a lined mouth with the pulley's old song. Sometimes it is a lidded cistern breathing leaf-cool air up through its mat. Sometimes it is only a depression you pass with respect because it belongs to another route. Etiquette travels with you like a shadow. No shouting at water, no boots near the lip, no gossip that would sour a bucket. You learn the command response of thanks that fits each place. A coin and a nod, a brief shoulder to the rope, a story shared at the right length between sips. As latitude tilts, The wind begins to bring warmer breath, and a different mix of scents. Grass first, then a ghost of river mud, then the green that lives in your throat before you can name it. Sand waves flatten. Hardpan shows its old scars. Beetle tracks scribble hurrying punctuation across last night's ripples. Your animals lift their heads at dusk, not toward stars, but toward a rumor you can almost hear. A city thinking about morning. In the next days, you meet caravans traveling the other wayskins plump, eyes thirsty for salt. News trades hands, like a careful package. Dunes reborn, a small tax added at a certain gate. A well praised for fairness, a band of wind that learned new tricks. You give directions you drew in your memory. You receive others in return. The desert's map lives more in voices than in lines. A small handful of crushed salt changes hands, not as a sail but as a wish for safe miles. Bells keep their paragraph. Rope sings its low spine song. Your feet keep their part of the pact. Long stride when the flats are kind, short when the ripples remember mischief. The poetic camel, seduced by a particularly photogenic cloud, slows for one significant heartbeat. Her neighbor hums encouragement. You tap the rope twice and remind her that even poems have meter. She continues, composed. You camp where scrub begins to argue against sandlow thorn, a brave patch of green. Night insects gather their courage and send a larger choir. Smoke from another camp arrives with a menu your stomach appreciates. You fold your scarf into a pillow and think of the ledger's neat columns becoming baskets of grain. In the darkness, you can almost smell ink that traveled by water instead of wind. Morning builds itself with new tools. Bird call you couldn't hear in the open desert. The far-off pulse of oars if your ear decides to pretend. A cool that comes from a horizon that is wider down low. The line walks into it, and hooves find older paths packed by many market seasons. You pass a cairn taller than a man and add one small stone. Because you can, and because the future often needs a pebble more than a speech. Talk never gets loud, but it gets warmer. People name food, they miss sorrel. Fish, fresh millet, cake. Mouths smile at the thought more than they water. The cook hums a tune he only hums near rivers. The path reader loosens his veil and tastes the change in the breath of the earth. You point to a smudge of trees that might be imagination and then becomes truth. By late afternoon, the wind carries a real scent that even sandals can recognize. Wet wood, reed sweet, smoke taken straight into the lungs by water's own road. A bird you haven't seen in weeks writes its name in the air and dips. A line of low structures comes forward from the horizon walls and roofs, and the particular geometry of people living close. Corners, straight edges. The grammar of markets. The bell camel raises her head, and, in a rare concession to commerce, walks a fraction prouder. The rear bell answers with a hopeful note. You smooth your hand over a salt face and feel the chill of a morning quarry under the sun of a new place. The ledger under the guide's arm becomes a key again instead of a memory. Your tally cord rests against your hip like a snake that knows it will soon be counted. Ahead, wait Timbuktu's, sandy lanes, or Gao's riverfront. Scales that speak in clicks, courtyards where shade tastes like a second drink, and hands ready to turn silent white into the noise of food and words. The caravan breathes as one. The sand softens into soil. The bells keep time as the south opens its doors, and you step toward the markets along the Niger, carrying quiet promises ready to become bread, books, and stories that will walk home with you by a different light. The river greets you before you see it, cool breath on the face, a scent of wet wood and reed, a promise that sounds like a long, relaxed exhale. Through the thinning trees, roofs start to rhyme. Corners appear, then the quay opens like a palm. Barges nudge the bank with the patience of cattle finding shade. Timbers bumping timbers in a soft, practical rhythm. Prayer drifts thin and silver over the water and lands gently on your shoulders. Stalls bloom along the lanes like bright idea schola piled like red-brown buttons. Cloth in ocean stripes and sand-quiet hues. Books wrapped in leather that smells like cool rooms and careful hands. A call reaches you from a gate, question and answer stitched into one line. You answer with your own thread, and the words do what words should do at a city's edge. They open it. The bell camel lifts her head, considers being dignified, and then the rear bell gives a low, pleased knock. Your feet remember how to Walk on earth that stays where it's put. The market has its own weather shade made of woven mats, awnings turned to the wind's favorite angle, alleys that funnel cool toward thirsty faces. A boy jogs past with a tray, tiny cups blinking green at the rim from mint you can smell before you can see. You catch a quick smile between a scribe and a boatman and think, yes, this is a place where news arrives in 3 languages and a shrug. Salt becomes money in a way your hands understand. You set a stamped slab on a reed mat in a courtyard. Chalk a simple mark on the face, 2 strokes, and a dot to say yours and mine and this moment. A grain merchant squats across from you, palms open in the usual, friendly surrender to arithmetic. The scale between you is a beam with 2 pans. It clicks when it knows the answer. He places a weight, then a smaller weight. You place a measure of salt flakes you've shaved from the slabs, edge clean, white, honest. The beam nods, yes. You trade heavy for heavy, fur salt for grain. Sacks of millet lean into your rope with the same confidence salt had this morning. Copper is next, a line of small, bright ingots, cool to the touch, their edges wrapped in a rag so the day won't smudge their shine. Paper follows, the treasure that rustles sheets stacked and tied in flat bundles, some chalked with promises and prices, some fought for by scholars with soft voices and fierce eyebrows. Books wait under cloth, titles murmured, pages smelling of gum and ink, of sermons and star maps and receipts that traveled more carefully than kings. Cola nuts sit in mounded baskets like small planets, bitter at first bite, then useful in the afternoon when the road's eyelids get heavy. You offer a curl of salt shaved from a stamped corner and receive a handful that will become friendship at 3 different wells. News arrives as part of the price. The smaller cistern at the east gate, covered with a new mat. The toll at the second ferry fare, if you smile first. A caravan from the north lost its patience, but not its camels. Avoid the ridge that looks like an old man sleeping. Polite bargaining here is a conversation about weather, but the weather is numbers. You don't raise your voice. You raise one eyebrow, tilt the slab just enough to show its stamp again, and the merchant taps his chest, as if to say, I respect that. He touches his weightstones with his thumb to prove they haven't grown heavier since morning. You return the courtesy by swapping pans, a small test that says trust is not a rumor. The beam agrees, clicks once like a contented beetle, and you nod. Someone draws a chalk line across the slab's corner to mark the portion sold. Chalk is the market's memory when ledgers are busy. At the cloth stalls, color talks first. Indigo, deep as night, leans toward you, then a soft, dusty gold, then a stripe the exact color of a river at noon. You run a knuckle across a weave, check the give. Picture it as a windbreak, a scarf, a gift for a gate guardian who prefers tassels to talk. A weaver mentions her cousin's ferry. You mention a clear well with a good pulley 2 days north. You both pretend you didn't plan on sharing maps today and share them anyway. A scribe opens a leather cover like a door and lets you in. Paper sheets lie flat and cool, ready for names, lists, tallies that will remember your steps when your feet forget. He writes your stamp sign once, neat, then again quickly for counting. He sands the ink with a pinch from a small pot. The letters, set like intentions, you pay him partly in salt, 1 measured piece for the work, another for the way he reminds your future self of your present honor. The bell camel attracts an audience, schoolchildren, a man carrying fish wrapped in leaves, 2 scholars arguing kindly about which star deserves which page. She poses like a merchant's emblem, and, when she is tired of fame, recites a very short poem about dignity and ropes. You hiss a laugh against your scarf, and untie a date. She pretends not to notice the gift, then notices the gift, with great dignity. By the river, barges trade angles with the bank, poles dig in. The water gives loads, step onto planks, grain from upriver, fish laid on wet reeds, pottery in stacks that sound like rain when you touch them. You taste the air, wood, pitch, turmeric, ink, a memory of iron even when no iron is in sight. The river laps like a large animal, calm because it knows what it can do. Prayers float and fold, then fold again, inside doorways and under lintels. Greetings answer like echoes that grew up. You bow at one threshold where a teacher is reading, his finger moving along a line in a manuscript that is older than the palm above it. He nods at the salt stamp on your bundle as if to say, This, too, is scripture, just written in a language the stomach reads. You count your day the way a careful cook counts. Spices, grain stacked, copper wrapped, paper tied, cola tucked, salt slabs chalked and resealed with cloth. The lead guide's ledger receives the numbers. The waterkeeper's cord accepts new knots. Grain paid, tax paid, friend promised. You walk with the scribe to the courtyard of weights, where officials audit with the gentleness of men who like sleep. They check stamps against seals. They press a coin into your palm for a small overpay you hadn't noticed. It glows larger because honesty makes money feel bigger at the edge of the market. A woman sells repairs the way a doctor sells, whether quiet and necessary. You hand her a girth strap. She sniffs it, leather and sun, tugs its sound, and stitches the tired hole with thread dipped in wax so the knot will remember its job through 3 moons. A boy brings your waterskin to a basin and rubs the stopper with a leaf. The goatskin drinks a little and promises to behave. That evening pulls a long, cool ribbon along the quay. You follow it to a guest yard where shade has opinions and tea has 3 acts. The first cup is dark and stern and tells you to keep your back straight while you count. The second is sweeter and asks your shoulders to come down from their hooks. The third is a lullaby that leans you into tomorrow. Bread appears with a smear of oil that tastes like the color of noon. Stew arrives that remembers pepper and cinnamon without bragging. You think how many mouths live inside each slab, and the slab seems to agree. You lay out gifts for people who make roads possible. A small salt curl to the gate watcher who answers with a shy grin. A strip of cloth to the ferryman's daughter who keeps the ledger when the ferry forgets. A little cone of incense to a house whose door you walked through with dusty feet. These are not payments. They are good habits, the way you might tap a wheel before a hill just because. The river tells slow stories after dark. Lamps along the quay pull their reflections into long ropes that the current plays with. The market's thunder softens to a purbageman speaking to ropes, a scale that insists on one last click, laughter that knows the way home. You sit with your back to a warm wall and write your own tiny chapter with the scribe's reed. Slabs to grain, slabs to copper, slabs to paper that will turn into letters in a city you haven't met yet. Tomorrow will be a repair day, the kind of day that looks small and keeps you large. Saddles will be unstrapped and oiled. Felt pads will be combed and shaken. Toggles will be sanded and praised into smoothness. The poetic camel will receive a ceremonial brushing and will compose a 4-line epic about it. The waterskins will nap in the shade with new stoppers. Ropes will lie in lazy coils and dream of being straight again. You breathe the river one more time, read sweet fish in smoke and land. The taste of the desert tucks itself under your tongue like a secret you're keeping until morning. Your palms still remember the chalk and the click of weights. Your shoulders remember the click of toggles and the bell's punctuation. You imagine the southbound road turned into lists and stitches, not miles, and it feels like mercy. A last call and response crosses the water. You answer without standing. The night puts its hand on your head and smooths your hair like a patient ant. In the guest yard, tools lean against a wall with the confidence of things that will be wanted early. The river laps, it's slow, yes. Scales rest their tongues, and the market folds itself like a well-read letter. You stretch, you smile at the quiet, and you step toward the little chores that make big journeys 2 rest days, and repairs waiting like 2 cool palms. Ready to hold your next mile steady. Morning sits softly on the guest yard, and your tools lean where you left them like friends who saved your chair. You roll your sleeves and bring the small world of repairs into your lap. A girth strap waits, dignified and torn a square mouth where strain made a new opinion. You test the leather with your thumbs, the way you'd test bread for doneness, and nod at its honesty. The awl kisses the edge with a neat punch. 1, 2, 3, chole, a door for thread to travel through. Each door a promise kept, waxed. Thread hisses softly through the leather, a whisper that sounds like advice given by an ant who has mended more than straps. You stitch low and close, in little ladders that pull the edges together without scolding them. Every pull smooths the day ahead. No sudden slack at the 8th mile. No surprise song from a panicked load. No story you didn't choose to tell. You rub a thumb of oil across the finished seam and the strap size. It smells of sun and patience and the mild pepper of wax. You smile because you can feel future troubles skipping your camp, like a visitor who remembered a different address. The saddleboard gets its bath next, not water, but oil poured like a small prayer on your palm. The wood drinks in circles, the grain waking under your hand like a back relaxing. You chase dry corners and teach them to shine again. A good board is a quiet teacher. It asks for little attention often, instead of much attention late. You sand one edge where a tiny splinter wanted to become a personality, and then rub oil into the smooth new truth until it looks born that way. The tassels that wag flies away have gotten tired of their own enthusiasm. You gather them red thread, indigo thread, a bead here and there like a wink hand, retie their knots the way you retie friendships after long miles, firm, a little playful, with the right length so they dance instead of tangle. You hold them up to the breeze and they practice their small magic, shivering into a fringe the flies prefer to avoid. The poetic camel watches you solemnly and pretends she has editorial notes. You thank her for her input and add one extra bead anyway. Around you, the yard hums with maintenance as survival. The cook scrubs a kettle until it remembers being a mirror. The waterkeeper checks stoppers with 2 sharp twists and a sniff that could start a career. The pathreader shakes out his indigo veil. Dust falls like a brief rain, and a new line of blue looks ready to read more wind. You tighten a toggle with a wrap of thin leather, turning squeak into hush. Everywhere, little fixes undo tomorrow's crises before they get out of bed. You tip a water skin into a shallow basin and wet a square of cloth. The goatskins seem to get a careful massage with warm hands, and a bit of gum cracks learn to be smooth again. Corners remember the shape of trust. You test for leaks with your cheek. Not your eye school is honest. Damp is gossip. Where it whispers, you answer with a touch of resin and a patient wait. A good water skin is a pocket of tomorrow. You treat it like it contains hours as well as water. The yard's gate opens to a thin street that leads to a small shrine tucked in shade. You go because people who travel long roads carry the road inside, and it enjoys being recognized. The shrine is simple, a low niche hung with cloth, a clay lamp with a wick that remembers 100 breaths, a palm mat worn smooth by knees. You place 3 dates on a shallow platform for the road behind you, 1 for the road ahead, 1 for all the ordinary steps that turn distances into arrival. You add a pinch of salt, because that is the language your hands speak best. You bow your forehead to your fingers. You don't ask for miracles. You ask for the small, boring things that keep everyone whole. Knots that hold, stoppers that don't lie, clear eyes at night, wind that speaks in complete sentences. Someone in the courtyard chants under their breath, a line you've heard in 3 towns and a dozen accents. The words are about guidance, but they feel like shade. You borrow them for the length of a heartbeat and leave them where you found them. A scribe sits nearby with a table that looks like a ship, flat, sturdy, knowing how to carry stories. He's the same man who weighed your page yesterday, or his cousin, or the idea of him that cities keep. You greet him, and he lifts your tally cord from your belt with reverence for knots as memory. He rubs the string between finger and thumb, reading bumps like a blind poetful. Paid, promised, gifted. He unties a messy knot someone made at dusk, and replaces it with 2 neat ones, each the size of a grain of millet, easy to count even when your eyes are dusty. He shows you a clever loop for emergency sip that your thumb can find in the dark without waking panic. You pay him in salt flakes and thanks. His smile says both are acceptable. He offers a read, and you accept because letters behave better when they travel in more than one pocket. You dictate a small note home. The scribe listens without rushing. Your words settle on the page like birds on a line. You keep it simple. We are well. The wells are fair. The wind has been decent company. The camel with opinions is still in good health and good literature. The salt is becoming bread. You add a line about the river smelling like reeds in relief. He sands the ink and folds the sheet. A boy appears to carry it as far as the next boat with a sack of fish and gossip. You hope it will take a long route so it can see the world before landing on your table. Back in the yard, the owl finds a last tasker strap that threatened to fray into a page of excuses. You punch and stitch with the contentment of a craft that no longer strains. Thread whispers, leather breathes. Your hands remember every tool by weight alone. A neighbor trims your beard with one practiced swipe, and returns the knife, handle first. The polite clap of small commerce and shared trust. You walk the line and show your repairs to the animals, as if to say, "See, we noticed before you had to tell us." Noses nudge the smooth new edge of a board. A lip tests a tassel and pretends to disapprove of its color. The bell camel lowers her head to the saddle and blows a small blessing across the strap. A fly, invited without invitation, tries to attend and is dismissed by the newly ambitious fringe. Why all this fuss? Because the desert charges interest on neglect. A dry strap becomes a late start. A frayed rope becomes a loud story. A cranky stopper becomes a thirsty afternoon that a single spoon of tea cannot comfort. Maintenance is not vanity. It's a secret recipe. It's a secret recipe. Fixes fewer crises. You trade 5 minutes now for 5 calm hours later. You put oil where friction lives. You make tomorrow grateful to yesterday. Lunch is a humble scene. Bread warmed against a clay wall. A smear of ghee that tastes like noon without the heat. A handful of olives that seem to know secrets. A cup of tea poured from higher than necessary because ceremony keeps elbows friendly. You share dates with the scribe who refreshed your cord. He shares a rumor about a path of crusted pans that held firm for a caravan last week. You tuck the rumor into your pocket with the spare needle and the extra stopper. Not all tools are metal. Afternoon leans, and shadows stretch like cats waking. You coil rope the right way so it will uncoil the right way. You stack felt with a breath between layers so each can cool like bread on a rack. You hang the water skins in a patient row. Stoppers up, necks relaxed on audience that will clap at dawn. The ledger receives its modest ceremony. Marks transferred cleanly. Totals checked with a thumb and a squint. A tiny drawing of a star in the corner because the guide can't help himself. You visit the shrine one more time to return the lamp to its simple bright and to say thank you to whomever listens when people whisper. In the doorway, a child traces the stamp on your smallest salt piece with one finger, then hands it back as if it were a coin from a game that never ends. You give them a tassel, bead indigo, like a night that says yes, and the trade feels cosmic for exactly 3 seconds. You step into the lane, and the city folds itself behind you with satisfied creaks. The river's breath cools your neck, then fades as the road lifts again. The caravan gathers like an exhale, becoming a stride board's oiled straps, thinking less. Tassels proud, skins rounded, ledger closed with a soft clap. Bells agree on a tempo that sounds like a confident heartbeat. The poetic camel composes a couplet about leaving places better than you found them, and then walks exactly on the beat to prove she isn't only verse. Ahead waits familiar emptiness, which is not empty at all when you've learned its grammar. You know where the dune shoulders are kind, where pans might be crusted and worth the early step, where cairns lean like elbows on the horizon, patient and precise. The wind tilts a first cool hand across your cheek, and you test it without looking. Up-north-east, helpful and modest. You answer by tightening one knot you would have tightened anyway and smiling at the uselessness of worry when your tools are honest. You share a last date with the yard gate, which is to say you tuck its shade into your pocket as a memory you can eat later. The guide lifts his chin. The rear bell nods, rope hums. Sandals agree to be brave, without editorial notes. The city gives you a small, tidy wave of prayer breath, a scribble of ink drying, bead glinting once in the dust, and then you are back in the lesson you know best. The road changes from cobble to packed earth, to old sand. Footprints of yesterday fade under the soft pause of evening. Stars begin their gentle rehearsal. The north clears its throat. Your hands sit easy on the rope, your shoulders easy under the scarf, your thoughts easy in the rhythm. Repairs behind you, blessings beside you, good habits holding you together. You and the caravan lean into the long return, across familiar light and familiar quiet, toward the first low dune that will become a line of poetry no one needs to read to understand. Night puts a cool hand on your neck, and the road agrees to be quiet. Breath drifts from your scarf in thin threads, pale as moth wings, and dissolves a step ahead of you. The bells spread out along the string like far stars, one bright at the front. one low and steady at the back guiding the space between, not with noise but with promise. Hooves pad the sand as if smoothing a wrinkled sheet before sleep, and your thoughts follow their rhythm without needing to be asked. The sky is a slow river of light. The patient north sits where it should, calm as a nail in a dark door. Familiar constellations slant, just a little different on this homeward side, like friends who changed their haircut but kept their laugh. You keep the same small bargain you've kept every night. You do not chase the star. You keep it where you agreed near the bell camel's earond. Let the world turn under your feet. Songs begin at the front, not loud, just low enough to fit under the scarf and under the ribs. Call, then answer, then a hum where the words would get thirsty. Old songs know the pace of hooves. They lengthen strides when the ground is generous and shorten when ripples pinch the surface like little frowns. The melody is simple, the way good tools are simple. It counts for you when your mind prefers to wander, and it puts your breath on a leash so it won't run ahead and get lost. Memory maps grow while you walk. They are not lines on paper. They live behind your eyes and under your feet. First, a cairn, a tidy pile of stones against the flat anchors the page. Then a dune with a shoulder like a sleeping whale leans into place to the right of that cairn. Between them, a shallow pan lies pale as old bread, where the night knits a crust. From there, you remember a stripe of darkest sand. That means morning. Dew lingers. Beyond that, a thorn that once tried to shake hands with your ankle. The map is a necklace of moments. Cairn, to dune too well. Ripple, to pan to shoulder. You string them, you wear them, you pass them down. You try a small experiment, because curiosity is just a friendly compass. You walk a stretch where the ripples have a steady beat, and without telling anyone, you count steps between ripples and the desert nods. 2, sometimes 3 small steps from crest to crest, when the wind has been playful. 1.5 when last night pressed the grains firm. It is not exact, because the desert refuses exactness unless you've earned it. But the count gives your feet a quiet game. Your sandals pretend not to care. Then they land exactly where you hope they will and feel smug in an understated way. Lead rotates without ceremony. The front job is a good job, and a hungry one. Eyes there read the winds. Handwriting, test ripples. Listen to bells, as if each were a shy messenger. After a while, the second pair slides up fresh attention. Fresh ankles, and the first pair breathes deeper, falling into the easy echo of following. It's not about pride. It's about keeping everyone's eyes bright. Animals lead and then rest too. A camel that loved making decisions at dusk may prefer the middle at midnight. Rotating keeps the string thinking with more than one brain. Laughter travels best down a rope line because it doesn't need words to hitch a ride. The front sees a beetle diligently crossing the track and moves a toe so the beetle's biography can continue. A snort of appreciation floats back, bumps the rope, becomes a grin to pairs behind. Someone starts an absurdly serious poem about a kettle that thinks it's a drum. The rear bell answers with a single knock that somehow improves. The meter, a joke at the front, loses its edges by the time it reaches the middle. It arrives as a warm shape everyone recognizes, and no one is left out of the warmth. The air has a taste the star breeze, clean and faintly metallic, as if the night steeps iron filings in cold water. You breathe it slow and it returns the favor. Your scarf keeps the tiniest grit polite. When you lower it for a sip, your breath blooms in white, and your lips feel the salt that has lived in the cloth since morning. The sip is small, on purpose. Thirst likes to hold court at night and make grand speeches. Small sips keep the assembly civil. Karens pass at their dignified intervals. Some are waist-high with a flat-top stone that looks like a thinking hat. Some are shy stacks no higher than your knee, left by a caravan more modest than yours. You add a pebble now and then, not because the cairn is starving, but because you are feeding your future memory. Your pebble will be a syllable in the sentence you'll read the next time the sky is a little less helpful. It's a vote in favor of not making the same decision again without help. The path reader's silhouette cuts the starlight, a narrow wedge of indigo against the dim horizon. He doesn't make a show of it, but you copy his small habits. When he tips his chin toward the lee of a dune, you aim for its shoulder and feel your knees thank everyone involved. When he lifts 2 fingers and draws a tiny circle in the air, You shorten your steps, and pack the track for those behind. When his hand goes low, palm out, you pause long enough to let a moodier patch of sand finish telling its story to the wind. Stories pass, too, because silence doesn't mean emptiness. The rear pair describes a market child who could balance 6 cups of tea on a tray while inventing new prices. The cook tells the legend of a camel who refused to carry anything but poetry, and ended up being paid in tassels and applause. You contribute the tale of a beetle who outran your shadow for 3 full breaths, and then forgave you for winning. None of it is urgent, which is why it lasts. Urgent things wear out the tongue. Gentle things rehearse and return. Sometimes a thin veil of cloud softens the star map, and ground takes over. You listen with your ankles. Firmer hush on the pan, faint sugar sliding on the slip face, crisp eggshell crackle when the crust agrees to hold. The bells grow more important front, chime a little higher as it steps on the packed path. Rear bell, a shade lower as the last pair packs it again. You keep your eyes at shoulder height, not at your feet. Trust the lantern you're building behind your ribs. When the moon chooses to rise, she lays a pale lane for you, and then pretends it wasn't on purpose. Shadows lengthen and walk beside the camels, big and calm as older brothers. Without the moon, the starlight is enough. Your eyes invent a dozen words for grey you cannot pronounce, and none of them argue. The air cools, dew suggests itself, rope fibers tighten just a little, speaking in a cleaner note under your palm. You like the sound. It makes your hand think of instruments and of work done well. At the second watch, the front changes again. A new song starts, not new, exactly, but it has a different joke in the second verse. The beat slides a hair slower to match the sand, which suddenly prefers reflection to ambition. You let your shoulders drop and your elbows become hinges instead of spears. The caravan is not a line anymore. It is a single animal with many feet, breathing through many scarves, thinking with many soft brains. You practice counting again. Not because you need the number, but because counting is a friendship with the road. Between 2 well-behaved cairns, you take 127 long steps. On the return, you'll see if the number wants to stay or change. A map that travels in your legs doesn't forget when the wind scrubs chalk off the page. A fox crosses your path, tail like a brush painting silver in the dark. It stops, writes a small question mark in sand with its nose, and leaves. You feel blessed by the punctuation. Ahead, a low glow convinces itself it's a horizon. Then you smell damp earth, hiding under the breath of cold. Home oases are shy like that. They send their scent to check your mood before they show their water dot rotations. Ripple watch to rest, rest to watch. The poetic camel takes the middle, where she can compose without endangering grammar. The practical neighbor keeps time with the bells by humming a note that sounds like a small furnace. Laughter drifts one last time, and the rope warms your palm where the joke passes through. The taste of tea you didn't drink lives in your mouth like a well-behaved ghost. When you pause to check a toggle, the world becomes a tiny room. Your breath fogs the rope, leaves a pearl on the fiber which the night immediately pockets. You tighten a knot that would have held anyway and feel the caravan thank you in the way it moves a hair smoother, a hair quieter. Small care pays in miles. The desert is a careful accountant.